All right, guys. So, like I said, we're going to go over quadratics a little bit. You may have seen these a bit. I think you did because you've talked about factoring, and they don't have a whole lot to do with what we've in geometry, but we have run into these a couple times. So the basic form of a quadratic is ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So I want you to take note of a couple things. First of all, we're always trying to get it to equal 0 in this sense because that's how we solve. Okay, that's number one. These are all coefficients, so we're going to use these a ton. Okay, that's what's going to determine the answers, and those coefficients are numbers attached to variables usually. I mean, c isn't attached to a variable, but they're actual numbers. Okay, so there's really three ways to solve a quadratic. Number one is factoring. That's always going to be our first option. Okay, if we can factor, we're going to. Number two is something called the quadratic formula, which we'll go over. I'm not writing as neatly as I'd like to here, and number three is graphing, which for the sake of this discussion, we're not going to worry about graphing. So we're going to cancel that one out. Okay, so let's talk about factoring. So I know you've done some of this before. So we're really going to focus, for now, we're going to let a be 1. Okay, so remember ax squared plus bx plus c. So if I have an equation, let's say x squared plus, I don't know, how about 7x plus 12, okay, equals 0. And I wanted to solve that. Now, notice here, it's x squared, okay? That's what makes it a quadratic. That means it's degree 2. And all that basically means is your highest exponent. That means there's going to be 2 answers. So if we're trying to factor this, we need to look for 2 numbers that multiply to that number. So basically multiply to whatever our c is, okay, and add to get b. Okay, so add to this number. So I think in this case, the 2 numbers that are going to multiply to positive 12 and add to get 7 are going to be 3 and 4. Now sometimes it's going to be a little more difficult, but for now 3 and 4. Positive 3 and positive 4. So when we factor this, we basically have 2 binomials, x plus 3, x plus 4, and it still equals 0. Now if we were to FOIL this out, remember that first outer inner last where you multiply things together, bang, like that, okay, we would get back to our original. But this makes it much easier to solve because what we have here is when we multiply, only one thing has to equal 0 for the answer to be 0. So 0 times 7 is 0, but so is 7 times 0. Okay, so what we do now is we set each part x plus 3 equals 0, and we solve that, and x plus 4 equals 0. So our 2 answers could be negative 3 if we solve that top one, or negative 4 if we solve the bottom one. Now, if we go back and check this, okay, so now I'm plugging things in, and let me scroll down a little bit to get a little more room here. If I do negative 3 squared plus 7 times negative 3 plus 12, I'm just checking, does that equal 0? 9 minus 21 plus 12 equals 0. Check. So that answer works. If we try negative 4 squared, I don't know why that didn't work, squared plus 7 times negative 4 plus 12, does that equal 0? 16 minus 28 plus 12 equals 0. Yes, it does. Okay, so let's look at another example here. Let's say we have x squared plus, and it's going to run out in 30 seconds here, 8x minus 20 equals 0. So remember, 2 numbers that multiply to negative 20 and add to get 8. I think those 2 numbers would be positive 10 and negative 2. So our 2 binomials would be x plus 10 and x minus 2. So our answers would be negative 10 and 2. Okay?